Hi guys, this video is about what I do about preparing weather-wise for going for a trip, so when I'm going to go. So I have the luxury of being retired, and that means I can go when there is no wind, so that's a big advantage, because sometimes that's during the week, not in the weekend. So I'm looking for those weather windows where there's no wind, and I use sort of 4 reports to decide on that. So I loosely keep an eye on the TV, I suppose, but then I'll go for more detail. So first thing is I'll just look at Wind Guru and just check what's happening there and see where they reckon there's going to be a drop in the wind. So we're going to have a look at that chart. Here's Wind Guru, and you can see it lays out the days across here: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and so today is Monday. And you can see up here that it's got wind direction there, southwest, going more westerly, and it's only 12 o'clock at 6 knots, dropping off, supposed to drop off. So there's a really good window in here, and so that correlates. Hopefully the other ones will say much the same. Going through the week, you can see the wind gets quite strong, so we've got quite a thing coming through till you get right through to next week, next Sunday, Monday. At the moment they're saying it's going to be okay, so that's another weather window. Tides are good during this area here when the weather's not so good, just starting tomorrow really, so this would be the prime time to go, but with that wind, of course, it's probably not going to happen. So that's the swell map, and then we'll move on to the next one. So after the weather window, I'll probably go to the swell map next, and the swell map gives me a much more detailed analysis of what the wind's going to be doing at certain times of the day and what direction. So I find that one quite good to just see whether that relates to Wind Guru. They seem to be quite different for a while, but they are sort of based on weather models, and they can change. So you look at them, you're looking 3 days out, but all of a sudden, when you think you're going to go, and then suddenly the weather's changed, think, oh damn, it's not like they said it was going to be. So it is a bit of you've got to definitely check when you're ready to go, to double check and make sure it hasn't changed and things aren't going to mess up for you. So you just need to be checking as you're going down those days, getting to the time that you go. So we'll check that out and just show you how I look at that map. Well, here's the swell map. You can see how you can go over here on the left hand side. I pick out the east coast, Auckland, and then you go to wind, you pick on wind. I just enlarge it 1 degree. Actually that's already 1 degree enlarged, and then you can see where the wind direction is going like this, and it's got a gauge up here for the wind strength. So today, June the 3rd, you've got a southerly breeze blowing this way, and we are at 6 o'clock in the morning. It's supposed to drop off in the afternoon. You can see it as we go to 9 to 12 and to 3 that it's dropping right off. So it's going to be nice and flat, calm, way out in the middle of the Gulf here, inside Waiheke. So it's going to be a great afternoon for fishing today. So that would tell you that it's a good day to go, going by the swell map. So we just check our other parameters and see whether they say the same thing. If they do, then you're pretty assured of a good day. So even if we go through to 6 o'clock, which you want to be home by then anyway because it's dark in the winter, but it's tending more southwesterly, but it's still all right. So that's good. Now the MetService is quite good to go to too. I go there quite a lot, so I go to the general MetService, and it has a couple of charts that I look at, and so we'll have a look at that, and I'll just tell you what I do there. So general MetService, and I go up here to the maps and radars, and you've got a 3-day forecast and a 5-day. It's quite good to look at the 3-day just to see. It jumps around a bit, but once you get it right, you can see the weather pattern in here. So, and then you can drag it along Monday 3rd, and you can just drag this along during the day, 6 p.m, 9 p.m. at night. Starts to change, but you can see in the morning At noon, midday, it looks pretty good in here, saying 5 to 10 knots. So that's a good indication. If you want to go back to the 5-day, if you're looking further out, then you'd look at this 5-day forecast, and you can see there how when you drag this along, it shows you the bigger pattern of the weather changing and how that bad weather's going to come sort of Tuesday, come right through, and it's not right until next weekend that you start getting this high coming through where the next weather window will be. But we've lost our good tides then. Alright, so that's always a good thing to do. And as you get closer, going back to the 3-day one is the one to go to, because that's telling you what's going to happen today or tomorrow or the next day. So good. And sometimes I'll go to Predict Wind and have a look there. I'm not subscribing to them anymore, so I don't get the full facilities there where you can enlarge and get details. So I'll just show you where it is and what it looks like. Just how it functions, and then you can choose whichever ones work best for you. But once I've got all those 4, generally looked at all those 4, I'm pretty sure that the weather that I'm going to get on my day is going to be mainly what they say. Sometimes they do contradict each other, so you're waiting for them to all actually say the same thing. Once they say the same thing, then you're pretty assured that that's what the weather's going to be. You're not getting any surprises, and you'll have a good day. So that's what I do. And generally I'm always out in good weather, so maybe it's 5 knots different sometimes, and that's a bit of a blow if it's on the nose or something, but from the east. But generally it works out good. So yeah, I'm happy with how I sort it out and what happens in the end. Predict wind over here, so I just have a look at that as a general backup. You can see it just shows the wind movements over the country, quite southerly. You can subscribe to this and get much better reports than what I do. For a while there it would enlarge, but at the moment it's not doing it, so it's just telling me the general wind direction is looking quite good, so it does correlate. And along the bottom is where you see the speed, and you can just drag this along for the day, and it moves the screen, and it gives you a timing over here for exactly what time of the day it's saying what's happening. So it's quite a good backup. You can see the weather moving as you come along on the day. One of the other things that I consider is the tides, because it's generally thought that the increase in the tide height, so you're going from 3.2, 3.4, that's actually a better time to go fishing when the tide is on the increase. And that happens a couple of times a month. And also what happens a couple of times is you've got the build up to the full moon, and that's supposed to be good, like the week before the full moon and the week before the new moon. So you're looking for those parameters as well. So the jury's a bit out for me as far as when the best time to go is concerned. I've been out when everything's supposed to be really good many times, and there's been just no action at all, and so it really upsets a prediction that you might have been working on. So seems to be when the fish are there and you're biting, well, you're lucky and that's great. So I'll be just trying to work out that myself and find out some formula that sort of guarantees that there's going to be some action, because when there's action it makes a whole lot of difference. There's birds around, or dolphins, and or just watching your intel all the time, what the fishing guys are doing. Guys like Ocean Angler, Paul from Ocean Angler, he's often given reports. So get on those guys' websites and Facebooks and keep up with what they're doing and where they reckon the fish are holding at the moment, ultimate charters, places like that. So I'm often got those feeds coming in, and they're telling me where the fish are, and that helps a lot, because you know the general area that you should be looking at and what's been happening for them. You can write it down if you want, keep a log, and then you can always go back to it each year and say, okay, in May this is what happens in May. You know, generally this is what happens in May, so you know sort of roughly where to go. There's definitely some patterns that will emerge over time, so if you want to go to the bother to keep all that stuff, I'm sure it helps in the end. So yeah, it's one of those things you got to think about as well. So Here's a more recent Wind Guru map because I'm thinking of going out fishing soon, and you can see here we've got the date at the top, Sunday the 9th of June. And you can see here that it's not too bad today in the afternoon. There's a bit of wind on Monday, but here Tuesday there's a real no window here. And I know that Paul from Ocean Angler's got his tutorials going out on this day, and obviously that's going to be my target day as well because it's a Tuesday, so it's not on the weekend. Looks great for the wind, so I'll be watching that day and hoping that it stays like that. Often just before a stronger wind actually comes, quite close to it, it can go really dead like this. So it's usually the best time, but it's just before the weather changes. So hopefully this is going to be a good day. So I'm going to be looking serious with that myself as another date going forward, different to the ones that I've said on this video, but I'm just putting it in to show you that ahead of time you can see these windows, and see there's another one way down the other end over here. So that one will probably change, but this one here is getting closer and seems to be reasonably stable. So I'll check that out with the other weather maps, and if they're all saying the same thing, then yeah, that's definitely a go. One of the other things that I consider also is the tide. It seems general opinion that 2 hours on the outgoing tide, the last 2 hours is a good time to fish. You see a lot of bite times will have their times around about that time. So if you are going out, you've got a limited time, we'll try and time it for that time so that you got the best chance. Fish tend to go on the bite when the current's moving, need current to move. That seems to be pretty generally accepted. The top of the tide and the bottom of the tide, and it's slack water, it's not supposed to be good. Still done all right at those times, but that's when you can move around, have lunch, do something else. And once the tide starts moving again, you need a good half hour, get it moving, and then you can start your fishing again. And part of the deal with that is that if you're dealing with structure and you want to be near a reef, well, that current working against the reef, when it comes up against the reef, it pushes the water up, and that water coming up brings the nutrients from the bottom of the ocean up to the surface, and your little microscopic organisms start converting that into their own proteins, and then slightly larger organisms do it again, and then you end up with your little bait fish, and then your bigger bait fish, and then your predators come around, and then we come around. So that's sort of how it works. So that's the reason you want to sort of generally at least scout out the pressure side of any structure once the current's moving, because generally you'll find that that's where your fish are holding. You can scoot around the back and do things, make a pass, but you always want to go past the pressure side and have a good look there. So that's a good reason to go fish near structure, really, because you know there's food coming up from the bottom of the ocean. When the current's moving, I guess the fish are moving around, so it depends whether you're anchored or not. If you're drift fishing, which I pretty well do all the time now, is just drift fish, and you're moving along with the current, and so you'll come across fish, or you'll just find fish on your sounder, and then you'll give it a go there. You get the temperature breaks in the water, which some small bait fish will hang around at certain temperatures, or there's lines in the water. The game fishing guys definitely look for temperature breaks because they know their bait fish will be holding in certain areas. Pilchards tend to leave the Gulf when it gets above 18 degrees or around about there. They don't like it too warm, so you get those annual migrations of the different fish coming into the Gulf. The bait fish, the pillies come in, and then once the temperature drops they come in for a while, and then you get the anchovies generally after them, and of course you get your snapper and your kingfish coming into the Gulf at certain times and from certain directions. So it's always good to get to know those, because that helps with the time of the year and where you're going to go, really. So then work your current out and your tide times and check the bait the bite time. So there's quite a lot of stuff to go through, but if it all works, it's great. And generally you've just got to put all those things in the mix, and the weather, of course, and hopefully you get a good day's fishing. Sometimes even if you're going out on a nice weather day and you don't catch much, at least it's a nice day and you can move around easily, because once it gets windy, unless you've got a bigger boat, it really limits the places that you can fish, because the choppy sea just makes it a bit of a nightmare. I use a drogue all the time pretty well, because I'm drift fishing, and that's a really important piece of kit. You really want a drogue, and a decent sized one, because even if it gets up to 15 knots sometimes, if you can sling it off the front of your boat, have a pulley system that runs along the side of your boat, which I use. Once you sling it off the front of your boat's facing into the wind, and while your lines you can cast them out the back and then they'll drift past your boat, but you can really cut that wave action down, and you can still fish in quite windy conditions and do quite well. Fish don't mind the wind. Sometimes it's better when there's a bit of wind around, so you can't be afraid of the wind. So think of that too. But for me, it's once it goes above 10 knots, it starts getting a little bit choppy. So I'm looking for a bit of shelter then, or it's time to go or do something else. Okay, well, I hope some help on the video, and hope you can get it all together sometime and get some good fish. So